Hey everyone, many times in your Power Apps you might have a data like I see in the screenshot here, and you may want to export it to CSV so that people can use it offline. Um, it's in Power Apps it's not very easy to do. There's no built-in functionality. So in this video we're going to learn how to do that using Power Apps. So just to show you how this will look, here's a very let me show you an app that I built here. This is a very fake app which has a gallery based on a collection, but the data could be coming from anywhere. It could be coming from your data source like SharePoint, a SQL, or a Dataverse, a common data service, whatever. And let's say you want to download this as CSV or ask user to get this as CSV. You can have a simple button in your app, and in this case I said you can email the data as CSV to the following email. User gives the email whatever they want. For example, I can send it to hello@cloudatica.com or whatever, and then this sends the email. And let me show you again how the email is going to look like. So let's say you do it again, click here, I give the email. By the way, don't try sending me email to this email address because this is just a test email. Okay, so email is sent, and here's my email open, and you will see after some time, if the flow works fine, you'll see an email with the attachment. I had sent some attachments earlier, so here's how this email is going to look like. It's a CSV file, and you'll see the attachment here. All right. So that's how this final functionality is going to look like. So let's see how do we build that. But before we jump into doing it, let me first give you a structure of how we are going to do this. It's a little bit of involved process. You cannot do it alone in Power Apps. You have to use Power Automate or Flow. So the first step, high level, that you will do is you will pass the collection data from Power Apps to Power Automate as JSON, and we'll see how to do that. Then you will use the Power Automate to parse the JSON and create the CSV, and then you can, once you have it in CSV, you have many options to use that CSV. The example app that I showed you, you could send that as an email, as an attachment in the email, but you can also create the CSV file in OneDrive for Business or SharePoint or whatever you want to. In this case, we'll show you many of these examples. All right, so let's get started. Let's create a very simple Power Apps app. We'll not get so fancy, but let's start with the blank app. So I'll start with the blank Canvas app in Power Apps, and I will totally start blank, although you could have started from any of these data sources as well and added the functionality there. And in this one, what I'm going to do is just for sake of this example, I'm going to create a collection that will have the data that you want to export. I have a series in my channel on collection. If you don't know about collection, for these kind of prototype, collection is a very good tool for you. Although the same concept will apply even when you get the data from any backend, you can just get that data from backend like SharePoint or SQL or what have you into collection as well. So let's do that in app on start. The reason I'm doing it here is because you can just easily simulate. I'll simulate that the app has started. It will fill the local collection, and that's the data we're going to use for the demonstration. All right. So let's say clear collect. If you've seen my video on collection, you'll know that this is a way to create the collection, and every time you run it, it will clear the existing data and populate the collection again. So let's say I say sample data collection, that's the name of the collection, and let's start putting data one by one. For this example, I'll just put 2 records. So let's say this collection has the first field as title, and let's put some field, first title, and the second one is description, and let's say description of the first item. That's it. And this is it. So now this collection has, every time you run it, you'll get sample data collection with one record. Let's just put 2. So I'm going to select this, copy, and then paste it one more time and make a very small change. So second title of the second item. So very simple collection. Let's see what happens once we run this on start. So I'll run on start. So it's kind of simulating that application has started when the user opens the app. And let's see what happens to the collections. You can go to view, collections, and as expected, you get a very simple collection with 2 fields and 2 records. All right. So now let's do something to see the data and then have functionality to export the data. So for that one, we are going to insert gallery control. It's just taking it from some inbuilt collection. We're going to replace the format of this. So we want just title and subtitle. And sorry, I'm going fast on gallery and some basic collection concepts because those are the basic concepts that I covered in some other videos. Here, I want to jump very quickly to CSV export functionality. Alright, so I got this gallery. I need to change the data source of this to the collection that we just created. So sample data collection, and PowerApps automatically decided that this is the right order, although I can always change it to title first and description later. To be honest, for CSV export, this order doesn't matter at all. Okay, so now I have the gallery and I have the collection, and this is the data that I want to export to CSV. So let's create a button, very simple button, and this button is what we are going to use to let's just change the name of the button or display text of the button. So I'll say export or send as CSV, send as CSV. I'm having some problem typing it. Let me just do it from here, send as CSV. Okay, send as CSV. Okay, so got the button. Now we will send it to this button is going to activate when Power Automate or Flow, because like I said earlier, PowerApps doesn't have any inbuilt feature to export the data as CSV. So what I'm going to do, I'll create a new flow which is going to accept input from this button, and the input is going to be JSON format of this, and that flow or that Power Automate is going to convert that into CSV. Okay, so let's see how that works. So here's my flow, flow.microsoft.com. I'll say create a new one, and let's start with an instant cloud flow, which is like a manual one, and I'll say skip. And the trigger for this flow is going to be PowerApps. That's because we're going to take the input from PowerApps. And this watching through this tutorial should also help you know if you don't know how to connect Flow and PowerApps together. All right, so this flow now knows that it has to get data from PowerApps. Let's take the second step. What I'm going to do is use something called compose. What this compose is going to do, it will take the input that we have from PowerApps and do some operations. So I'm going to do the operation of parsing this to JSON here. So I cannot really parse the JSON here, so let me delete it because I need the format. So probably I jumped ahead, so sorry for that. Let me do a very simple thing. Let me first just compose data operation and just take the input. And where is this going to come from? whatever PowerApps passes, and just save this. And so I got this Power Automate flow that's taking data. Right now it's not doing much, it's just taking data from PowerApps, and we will just get data in inputs. I want to make incremental progress and see what data we get. Now let's go back to our PowerApps, this app that we were creating, and for us to connect that flow to this button, what we have to do here is go to action and click on Power Automate. So I'll do that, and this is the new flow that we are creating. This is the name. We could have chosen a different name, just rename it, but I'll just stick with whatever whatever flow created for us. So this is the name. You see another one here because that's the one I was testing with as a preparation for this video. Alright, so now it says Power App arrow compose, that's the name of the flow, dot run, and I can give the input. Right now this flow takes one input. I can pass any input, but what is the right input to pass so that this data that we have in the collection, that is passed as JSON. So PowerApps has a function called JSON. That's what I'm going to use. It takes input like data, so actual data that we have, and for that I'm just going to take the collection that we created. So what was the name of the collection? I think sample data collection was the name that we chose. And then the second parameter that we're going to use here is called JSON format indent4. This is the right format to pass so that this collection data is passed as the JSON to the flow. All right, and I need to close the bracket. Okay. Still it doesn't do the whole thing, but since this is complex with two moving parts, flow as well as PowerApps, I like to always make incremental steps and see what happens. So what I'm going to do here is, this flow is already created, I have saved it, and let's see what input do we get. I'm going to close this so that it doesn't confuse us. Okay, let's see what data we are going to get in flow. So I did this. What's happening now is this button click is calling this flow with just this input. So it's formatting that collection as the JSON and passing that to flow. Let's see what do we get in flow. The way to do that is I'll go back to the run history of this flow. So it just ran, it succeeded, there's not much to do, but still we made a good progress here because now we could see the data that is passed from PowerApps. So see this array under square bracket with two records, that is the collection that we created in PowerApps. So that was the input and we got this as the output. And those who know about JSON, they can easily realize that this is the JSON format, it's all coming in an array. So this is very good. It's not only a good incremental step, it's also great because I'm going to now use this sample for rest of the stuff that I was trying to do earlier. So I'm just going to take this, copy, and you'll see how I'm going to use it. So after compose, I got the data from PowerApps. I have to convert this into CSV. Before converting, let's try parsing it to JSON. Okay, so let's parse this data to JSON because although it was parsed from PowerApps, but it came as an array input, we have to convert this. So what is the content? Content is going to be output, the output of this previous step that we took. And what is the schema? For schema, the best way to create the schema rather than handwriting is generate from sample, and this is where I'm just going to paste the information that we got in the previous input that we saw in the previous run. So it doesn't matter, these values don't matter, it's just the schema. In fact, I could have just taken this much, I could have gotten rid of this and still it would have been fine, but I'll leave the whole thing and say done. And this is it. So now we can pass the JSON, and where did we make the mistake? Okay, I think this should be fine now. Yeah. So you will see that it just took the sample that I gave it and it automatically inferred some kind of schema. You don't need to worry too much about it, but it kind of inferred some schema. What that tells is the input that is coming from PowerApps in this step, how do we parse it and what is the schema to use for parsing it, so that finally that input is converted into JSON in Flow. So let me step back and kind of review what we did so far. In the PowerApps app, we created a collection, and just for this demo we used a collection, but this collection that we created here in app start, but you could have gotten this collection from backend, SharePoint, SQL, doesn't matter, the concept remains the same. For this collection, and then we created a flow that takes input from PowerApps and it just composes, so just shows for us to see what is there in the input. And now from PowerApps we connect it to that flow using the action and we say run, and the input that we pass for this run is we convert this collection that we created into JSON format using this. So this sends data to our flow in an array with those two records as the JSON entries. Now in Flow we are parsing the JSON from this array input that we got from PowerApps. So hopefully this makes sense so far. And this was the main step. Next step is very easy. We just need to create a CSV table. So I'll say create CSV table from, and for this CSV table you just need to pass the JSON output that you get from this step. So go to dynamic options here and we will just choose the option from compose, and that's all. So let's save it and see what happens at the end of this step. So let's go back to our PowerApps again. Let's preview and run and see what happens on our flow side. So I'll go back to my flow and it failed due to some reason. So let's see what happened. Okay. So this passed schema, the output seems to be okay. The from property value in the table action input is of type string. The value must be of type array. So we pass this. Let's go back to the flow and see what happened. Oh, I see what mistake I made. So I used the compose outputs as the input for this, and that is not what we should have used. I meant to take the output of this step, and that's why Flow did not like it. So I'm going to delete it and use the body. Okay, I wanted to kind of just do this raw in front of you guys so that you can see what kind of problems, what kind of mistakes I made, and make sure you don't make the same mistake. Or if you face some errors because you mess up some step, don't panic. With so many steps, it's very easy to get messed up. So it's fine. This is how we build the app. So hopefully this time it should be fine. Let's try this again. So go back here, send a CSV. Let's go back to our flow, and hopefully this time it succeeds. Yeah, it said succeeded. So we got parse JSON, we had seen that earlier, so this is fine. Let's look at create CSV table. And as you can see from the CSV, we are getting comma separated values. So description and title, and these are the values for those two records. So we have our CSV. So technically we have the CSV now in the flow. Now it's up to us what we want to do. One option we can do is create this as a file in SharePoint or OneDrive. Let me show you how to do that. Or alternatively, we can also send as email. So let me first show you how to create as file. So your job after this is going to be very easy. Create file. There's an action for that, and you can create this in SharePoint. You can create this in OneDrive. Since I have OneDrive open, I'm going to create this in OneDrive for Business. So this was the first option. Okay, so OneDrive for Business. Here is my OneDrive right now. It doesn't have that CSV. Okay, so where do we create it? For now, I'm just going to say root, file name. I can put any name. To be honest, I could have also taken that as an input from PowerApps, but for now I'll just say download.csv. So it will create a file of this name and this extension. And the content is whatever CSV you generated in the previous step, so which is this output, and that's it. Our flow is now ready to create the file here. Let's try running it. You'll see an error, but let me first show you what do you get by running it, and then we'll talk about what error you get and why. So let's do this, and I don't think it will work. You see this error here. The reason for this error is now in our flow we are using a new connector which is for OneDrive for Business for creating the file, and for us to take advantage of this flow, we need to remove this flow and then add it again. That's how it knows that I need to have the connection for this new connector that we are using in the flow. So do remember that, and that's why I wanted it to fail for the first time so that you know what's going on. And I will just copy this so that I don't have to type it next time I do it. And now I'll remove it. On the on select of this button, I'll go to action and say Power Automate. It's the same Power Automate flow. It's adding, and now I'm going to copy that input back, whatever we had copied earlier, and let's run it again. This time I guess it should be fine. There's no error here, and let's see what happens. So let's look at the run history. Yep, it just ran 8 seconds ago. So for this, click and see what happens. It created the file. Let's go back to our OneDrive, and you see a new file is created. I can click on this, and you can see that a CSV is created. CSV is a text file comma separated. This is the header, and these two are the fields. So that's for creating the file, and at the end of it you can say, yeah, maybe this is all you wanted and your job is done. But let me also tell you some other ways, some other options that you can give in your app. Now there are some disadvantages and advantages of this. Getting a file in OneDrive is great because now you have your file here that you can use. You can open that from your app, but there's one challenge with that. One challenge is you're creating this file in OneDrive. Somehow you have to get the link of this and put this in your app. That should be easy. You can create a link from here, copy link, and if you always use the same name, the link name will remain same, and you can put that in the app. Now that approach is fine if you have maybe single user doing it, but what if multiple users are doing this kind of file creation at the same time in OneDrive? We'll have to kind of do more work to make sure those links are unique, because everybody might create with the same name. Then you have to figure out what unique name we can give, so it can become very complicated. So that's why I thought about there's another option that you can, in your app, you can say, I want to let user email email the CSV of this as an email to their email box or any email box that they want to, and that will be the unique data for them. I think that approach is better, and in general you might have seen in some other commercial applications also, which are not Power Apps, where this is a standard practice. You go to the app or you go to the website, you say I want this data as CSV, and then you get the option to get the data as CSV emailed to you. So that's the approach I'm going to follow here. So if you have to do that, let's see how to do that. Very simple. From Power Apps, you can create a text input control to take the email. I will remove this and I can give the hint text email or email address of the person where you want to send, and the user types this email, and then this button should trigger the flow that sends the email. So we have to go back to our flow and modify it to send the email. Now there's another interesting thing that you have to do. Right now you're sending only one input to the flow, which is just this collection as JSON. Now you also want to send the email address. So how do you send two inputs? That's another interesting learning that you will have in this video. All right. Now just a side note, this email address, you can either ask user to type, or you can also give an option for user to just get their email, which should be very easy. Let me maybe do that. User dot email. So whoever is, in this case, I think whoever is signed in user, yeah. So that email is automatically coming here, but user can change. So let's just do it here. That makes it simple. Now let's go back to our flow, edit it. Maybe I can delete this step. I don't want to create the file. I would rather take input from the user to send that as an email. So first thing we have to do is accept another input from the user. So what I'm going to do, I'm add an action here to first, let's say, put the email address of the person in a variable. So I'll say variable and say initialize variable, and let's say email recipient, and this variable type is going to be string, and there's no value here. And I'm going to actually get this value from PowerApps. So I'll say value is asked in PowerApps. So notice here we had previous one compose inputs, but we are creating another variable here, which also we're going to get from PowerApps. So okay, so now I'm getting this value from PowerApps. I'll create CSV table. In fact, this action I could have taken later also, that doesn't matter. After CSV is created, I want to send email. So I'll choose the action send email. Who do we want to send it to? I will take this as dynamic content. And what should be the two? It should be the email address that we got in email recipient variable, and this is the variable which will be populated from the input given by user in the PowerApps. So this is the email. I can put any subject. So I can say your CSV download is ready. Body is attached. Please find the CSV. And now last thing you can do is attach the file as CSV. So I will say, maybe we can use the same name. Now name doesn't matter, because this is going to be unique email to the person. So there is no chance of conflict here. Now what is the content of this attachment? It's going to be content of the CSV table that was created in this step. So let's go back to here and create CSV table. All right, and that's all we have to do. Hopefully there's no error. Okay, yeah, there's no error. So our flow is ready. Now we have to make sure that our Power Apps passes two inputs. Now this flow expects two inputs, one here which goes into the JSON JSON format of the collection that we have to use for creating CSV, and the second one is the email address to which we have to send this CSV as email. Let's go back to our Power Apps and make the changes. Go back to this button. Let's rename this text input so that we know what to use. So I'll say email address input. Okay, and on this button I think we'll have to, again, what I will do just to make it clean, I will copy this input that we passed, remove everything, and then add the action again for the Power Automate, because now Power Automate inputs have changed. So I'll do it again, choose the same Power Automate, and you will notice that this time it's expecting two inputs. So first input is compose inputs, which is the same thing that we had earlier, but now it also expects another input, and this input we are just going to pass the value in this text input, and the name of this control is email address input dot text, and I guess this should be it. Okay, let's test it. So preview it, send it. Let's see what happens to our flow. Go back and you see it succeeded, so that's good news. I also see one email here, so all the steps succeeded. Let's see what happened in the email. Okay, so it says your CSV download is ready, and we have one attachment here, and this is the preview, and we can always download it as well. So this is the second option. I prefer this option because this doesn't have any chance of conflict. So hopefully you liked it. It was a very involved tutorial, so let me just summarize for you. First of all, you have to make sure that you know the concept of hooking up Power Apps and Flow to run together, because there is no way for you to create CSV file in Power Apps. You have to get your data in collection. It could be coming from backend, but for your prototype you can always create a local collection. For sending a CSV, you can also take input of the email, but I will always recommend make incremental steps. So first, without email, create a flow that takes input from this Power Apps, and it first accepts that. Look at the output that you get from this step. Don't add other steps, just look at the step, see the output. In parse JSON, when you have to give the schema, generate from sample and use the value that you get here. This is a way to get the email. I'll say first time when you're doing it, don't worry about this. First get the CSV right. So for the CSV step, just get the output of this JSON and convert it to CSV. Output of this is the body coming from here. And then for sending email, once you add the email part, that's very simple. The email that you get from Power Apps, subject, body, whatever you prefer, but for attachment, just use the output of this. So that's all it is to this. Hopefully you found this video useful. As always, let me know if you need me to create some videos like that, or if you have any questions, leave them as the comment, or reach out to us. Here's our email, here's our website, and let me know if you want me to create any other video. All right, thank you, have a great day.